Hey everybody, it's Dan again, Urban Farms Manager. Today I'm going to discuss our pest management and disease management strategies, which with SUS Urban Farms fall under the umbrella of what we call Integrated Pest Management. Um, so Integrated Pest Management is a system that seeks to manage and control pest populations without the use of a lot of really harsh pesticides or herbicides. Um, and it it comes down to it's like a staged approach from planting to harvest that works through a series of different kinds of practices. So, for instance, some of them would be cultural practices, what we would call cultural practices. Um, that is plant culture, horticulture. So that would be like rotating your crops, making sure that every season you're not planting the same thing in the same place over and over and over again, which makes it more susceptible to disease. It includes proper spacing, um, so that your plants are getting the ventilation that they need, um, and are not an easy vector for pests, because if plants are really close, um, it's easier for pests to jump among them. Um, and that's something we take seriously because we do plant pretty intensely, so our plants are a little bit closer together than they would be in field agriculture. And it's also, among other things, it's picking the correct plants. So there are a number of heritage and heirloom varieties that I like to use because they are well adapted to our climate. Um, Another thing that you have to do all the time is make sure you're monitoring your plants for signs of disease and for signs of pests. Um, and this isn't just the plant itself, but it's also all the stuff that's happening in around your garden. So one pest that I'm going to talk about a little bit is the cabbage worm, which is a caterpillar. So those little white butterflies you see that are fluttering around this time of year, they lay eggs, and out of those eggs hatch a little green caterpillar called the cabbage worm. And they can eat your kale and your cabbage and your collards and any brassica. Uh, so when you see those white butterflies, you know you have to kind of start stepping up your monitoring practices. Maybe you want to put nets over the plants. Maybe you want to, some people set up traps. There are a number of different things you can do. Um, if you get to the point where you are having a pest issue, if the monitoring didn't result in a corrective measure, then you kind of can proceed to the next level, which is just a simple mechanical control. In the case of cabbage worms, that means just essentially just picking them off once you notice bite marks or holes in the leaves. Another pest that I have had issues with in the past is white flies. Um, they are exactly what they sound like. They're little white flies. They're really small. You'll find them underneath a collard leaf or cabbages. A lot of the pests that we get tend to affect the brassicas. And a mechanical control for them is just spraying the underside of the leaf with like a jet of water. And the nice thing about the scale that we grow at is that our gardens are small enough that our mechanical controls are usually really quite simple. Um, After mechanical control comes biological control, and this typically means that sometimes you want to introduce insect species, for instance, that prey on the pests that you're dealing with, or you want to create an environment that is welcoming to those species. So wasps, for instance, certain kinds of wasps, and yellow jackets, hornets, um, will actually parasitize those cabbage worms. So in our pollinator video, we talked about introducing flowers and all these other things. And when you have a diverse planting in your garden, you're going to tend to attract um, wasps and hornets as well, which they might be frightening, but they're good because they prey on some of the pests that we deal with. With aphids, which is another one, the mechanical control for those is similar to whiteflies. You can just blow them off with water. But ladybugs are a predator of aphids. Ladybug larvae eat aphids pretty much exclusively. So I noticed that they really like to congregate on mint plants. So it's another good reason to have mint plants in your garden. Um, if you have a really bad problem, then if you've tried both of these strategies, the integrated pest management system then calls for the responsible use of approved pesticides and herbicides, so that are organic, that are not harmful. I've only ever had to resort to pesticide once when I had a pretty serious cabbage worm problem at several different sites. We happened to be growing we were growing kale collards and cabbage all at the same time in relative close proximity to each other. So it was an environment that was inviting for that species. So I used what's called a BT pesticide, which is actually a bacteria that works specifically on caterpillars. You mix a little bit in the spray bottle with water, you spray it on the plants, and it causes a reaction that kills off the caterpillars. And it only affects caterpillars, doesn't affect anything else. I've only ever had to do that once. I think with proper cultural maintenance and techniques, it's not really something that we necessarily are likely to use. And there are other things too. I mean, with cabbage worms, there's the flour and baking soda mixture in equal proportions, and just sprinkle it on. Do not use too much. I used too much and burned some of my plants. So just use a little bit if you feel the need to go that way, and I'll have a video demonstrating that. Um, and that's about it. It's a staged approach that kind of progresses up these like levels of sort of invasiveness, I guess, without ever really doing anything that's going to be ecologically damaging. The goal is not to eliminate the pests entirely. The goal is to manage their populations at a level that is acceptable. And again, for us, we're not a commercial operation. We don't do big field agriculture. So these techniques are easy to apply. All you need to do is just make sure you're paying attention, um, and act accordingly. Um, Mostly, I'm talking about insect pests when we say IPM, but it applies to everything. So if you have a fungal issue like powdery mildew or something like that, there are steps to dealing with that apply these same rules, and I'll be demonstrating at least one of those as well. So, hope you enjoyed this. Stay in touch for the following videos on applying these ideas in the field.